So yeah, we basically wanted to, to give a little bit of, it's giving me the option to leave the meeting now that you turned recording on. So, we wanted to just talk through a little bit the payment precedence issue that we were dealing with last week. And, to some extent, we'll just continue dealing with this spring because of how payment application applied this semester. We wanted to just give you a little bit more context to hopefully make you feel a little bit more comfortable with what you're seeing in Workday, because we totally agree that there are things that are confusing about this and a little bit hard to understand when you're looking at the student account. And of course, students and parents are looking at their accounts and may and have had questions too. So, one thing that I wanted to mention even before we start is Emily had asked me last week about proxy for parents, because we've never had the ability to go in as a parent. And it actually, Christine at first didn't think that we could do it because, whenever we make a security change, sometimes there's unintended consequences. And part of opening up proxying to a parent looked like it would open up proxying to all of one another as staff at Point Loma, and that's just not something that we're, that we want to have access to for everybody. But they were able to make some security group changes that actually did open proxy up as a parent. So I want you to, Emily, I think you might still have that parent name. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but I was able to proxy in as him the other day. So you can feel free in Sandbox to go ahead and try proxying in as a parent to see what they see. Are you in there, Emily? You're muted, but you look very happy. But maybe
okay. Let me get into Sandbox. Hold on. I do love how much
I couldn't tell if you were happy that you actually got there or just happy at the concept.
I'm just happy in general today. It's fine. Oh gosh, I don't remember the parent either. I'm sure it's in our chat, huh?
Okay, I could find it. John Ernst. Wow, that took me a long time.
Ernst. And it's just start proxy, same.
Yeah, so you'd proxy in the same way that you proxy in as a student. If his name pops up, that's already a good sign.
Right. There he is. Boom.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and just share my screen because, and I can even show that. So thanks for going through that test. I wanted to.
Yes, it does work. That's
see if that.
Yay.
Yeah, so that is one helpful thing when you're when a parent's telling you that what they see is confusing, or they're just not sure where to navigate.
Yeah.
Then oops, I gotta start proxy. Okay, so here you could type in John Ernst, and it's thinking for a little while. So he shows up, and so now, now we can see what the parent sees. So if he goes into finances for a third party, then he's got his tip information, and then his student statement and student and view account activity. So hopefully this will just allow us. I think Monique would have been very excited if she was in here too, because I'm sure Monique gets really excited about that sort of stuff. And but it just kind of opens up for it's been a bit of an elusive area for us. And so now if we have suggestions for how things are viewed, or if there's any questions, Melissa has a little bit of a worried look on her face, but she may be thinking about something else.
I'm typing.
Okay.
Totally unrelated. Sorry.
Got it. Okay.
And I don't hide my facial expressions well, do I?
Nope.
You know exactly how I feel.
Yeah. So, and I think for John Ernst the other day, he was confused about and I don't know if it was on the account activity screen or the statement screen, but he was confused about I think about the refund that they got and the fact that it was tied to the fall academic period is probably where the source of the question came from him.
He was just noting the date seemed really wonky, which they do. So I'm like, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, so with all that said, I just wanted to start with that to let you know that you guys have that access now and that you can go in and you can search around as a parent to get the parent experience and to help advise them a little bit better when you're talking with them. But, then to back up and talk now about the payment application issue. So back in the fall, you may or may not remember because things have been chaotic this year, but there were some big questions about when aid dispersed for the fall, leaving balances that people owed for the spring and summer on their account, and us going and I think refunding some fall aid for students when they had an old balance. And so, and I remember specifically talking with Monique about this, but that was basically, what happened based on the configuration that we had in place for payment application and payment precedence. And, there were limitations then in Workday that said, hey, I can't pay this old balance with my current aid. I can only pay my current balance with my current aid. And then we have to go back and figure out how to pay that old balance, or somebody needs to go make a payment to pay off that old balance. And so at that time, then we reacted to that and said, you know what, actually, let's let all of our institutional financial aid, Point Loma financial aid, go back and pay all of the oldest charges first, because we want to settle the old charges when we want to bring this balance forward, or at least be able to, with that extra money, pay those old net conversion charges. And so we made a change to the payment application to say, pay the old stuff first and then pay the current stuff now. And so, kind of the beauty and the challenge with the Workday is that, and we've talked about, these types of things in the past, but it's, there's so much configuration options in Workday that Workday is really smart, but it also makes it so that it's much more complex than what we were used to with CX, because CX basically had, when it came to payment application, it was, you've got an account, a CX student account, and we have everything just dispersing and paying on that account. And the only limitation really there was that, a Title IV excess needed to be refunded as Title IV money. So we had a calculation to determine what Title IV charges are to determine what a Title IV refund should be. But that was basically like the level of configuration that we had in CX. But now that we're in Workday, we have this whole concept of payment application, which allows us to, on a much more nuanced level, say what types of aid or payments can pay what types of charges, and what period of payments is paying what period of charges. And so it really, allows the system to make all of those decisions for us based on our configuration of, should this Parent Plus loan go back to the parent? Should it go back to the student? Is the refund of the Parent Plus loan, or is the refund of the student loan? Or is the student not eligible for a refund because their institutional aid is over their institutional charges? And so there's, all these things that Workday can do and is doing that really help support us in our processes. But it also means that, we're locked into some of this configuration that may limit us too. So, there's definitely like pros and cons to the way that we can and do configure our payments and our aid in Workday. So just to set it all up, like that is kind of the challenge that we've been working with in this configuration. So
can I add one thing, Kevin?
Absolutely.
Just quickly. So with payment precedence, and this is a new concept as well, but anytime a student gets a new charge or a new payment comes in, it reevaluates every single payment and what that payment should apply to. So it literally takes the payments off of every single charge and then goes through the order that we've defined to try to find the best order to apply all of those old payments and reapplies them every single time. So Workday gave us the ability to at least say, limit the payments that you unapply to like just this award year, or maybe you want to say last award year and this award year. And so right now we're saying, and they only do it by award year. So we can't even say, stop evaluating fall, but keep evaluating spring. It's like for 2021, anytime something comes in, we're going to take off everything for all of the payments that occurred in 2021 and reevaluate how those payments should be applied to students' charges, which is like, it's mind blowing to try to figure out what it does every single time and like why, but like just kind of, I guess, keep that in the back of your mind too, of just because, on Monday a payment comes in and applies a certain way. If something new comes in on Friday, it's going to reevaluate everything, make a new determination of like what the student's application is of all of their payments.
Yeah, and you can really think about it. I mean, the reason why Workday is doing that is because the order at which you receive payments doesn't necessarily dictate the order at which they should apply. So, say a student or a parent's making a payment in December for spring, but aid's not going to disperse. I'll just talk normal months because this year is so weird. I'll just talk like this is a normal spring. So normally spring aid disperses in mid to late January, right? So student pays in December. Financial aid disperses the end of January. Well, when financial aid disperses, just because the payment that was made came in first doesn't mean that financial aid is all stacked on top of that payment, right? It's, we go back and we say, okay, their scholarships paying their charges, and then their loans are paying their charges. And then on top of that, we also receive the payment. So when it comes to refunding and determining what's causing that credit, Workday is reshuffling that and saying, okay, now, I used to have just an e-check payment, but now I have an e-check payment and a scholarship and a Parent Plus loan and a student loan. What do I do with the order of those to make sure that the excess that is refundable to the person is kind of the last of that priority that needs to get sent back? And so, that's why Workday is doing that. It's not a problem that it's reapplying. It's just totally a new concept to us. But the whole reason is to say, I've got this amount of financial aid and payments. If I've overpaid, what is that amount going to? And, even within that, what types of things can these payments pay? Because we can't have Title IV aid paying chapel fines. That's a Title IV rule. So, all of that kind of configuration supports what can it pay and in what order does it pay. So, with all of that context, just to give you a little bit more then about what happened with the spring. So in the fall, we made that change to say, hey, we don't want old balances unpaid. So let's allow institutional aid to pay old balances. Let's open up the configuration to do that. And then we came to our spring disbursement. And then our spring disbursement still said, hey, I want this institutional to pay the oldest charges first, because we kept the same configuration in place that fixed the issue for us in the fall. And what it did is said, oh, you've got a scholarship right now for spring. Since you told me to pay the oldest charge first, I'm going to go back and apply the spring scholarship. Since scholarships come before loans, I'm going to unapply your student loan. And then I'm going to but then your loan can only pay the current period that it's meant to pay. And this is where I get really, really confusing. So So feel free to ask questions. But it basically took the spring scholarship, applied the spring scholarship to their fall charges, unapplied their fall loans, but then it couldn't apply the fall loans to the spring, where we've now created a balance because we used your scholarship to go back and pay for fall. And so we then had to say, okay, we've got this fall loan that's sitting on the account unapplied. Let's go ahead and just apply it. We know that your fall loan is within your fall spring loan period, or we actually checked for that to make sure that that was true. And so then we took that fall loan and applied it to pay the rest of their spring charges. So that's where you see this flip-flop of when you look at some of these students' payment applications, you can see, oh, your merit award from spring paid your fall charges. Now you have a fall loan that's paying your spring charges. And then, by the way, if you're eligible for a Title IV refund, then when we generated the refund to you, Workday knew that was a fall loan. And so it said, you just got your fall 20 loan as a Title IV refund in the spring. So that's where this kind of like flip-flopping of what aid paid which session happened. At the end of the day, the dollars are still the same dollars. The credit balance is still the same credit balance, but the application of the aid to that session is what, got mixed up for these students.
And if someone had made a personal payment, that can apply to any charge, any period, no restrictions, right? So Workday followed that order and left kind of the loans from fall as, oh, nope, there's like, now everything's paid for in fall. So now they have this credit on their loans. And then it went and paid for spring, and they had personal payments that could pay for spring and whatever. And so it kind of left this fall loan as unapplied, when normally, I guess, if we were looking at it, we'd say their personal payment is what should have been left unapplied or as a credit, But because we let personal payments just pay for anything and everything, when Workday went through that process, it paid for everything it could. And where where that stopgap was is in loans, because we have these federal restrictions on what periods loans can pay for and what they can pay for. And so when we fixed it or applied their fall loans to spring, there might have still been a credit there, and we just put it onto the account rather than going through and saying like, oh, did this person make a personal payment? I'm going to unapply their personal payment manually. Then I'm going to apply their loan, and then their credit's going to be the personal payment instead of the loan. Like we had, I think, over 1,000 people we looked at or something like that. So we just didn't have the time or maybe the energy to go through and like make those kinds of decisions, unfortunately. And so it did make it where we were kind of giving a Title IV refund to someone that probably, if it could have applied perfectly the first time around, they probably would have had a credit from like their personal payment instead. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I had a student like that yesterday where they have a gigantic plus loan. Like I think they got the max for like 43,000. She got a giant credit last semester or refund. And then she just got 2 more checks, and the mom was like, why am I getting both of these? And so that explains it. Like some of it was a credit that had been created by something else in the fall, but since everything was sort of reapplied in a different way.
Was it this student, Isabella Dempsey?
No, it wasn't her.
Who was the one we were just looking at who had a huge?
I was talking to Katie. I was talking to Katie about her yesterday because mom was like, I'm happy to keep the money. I just want to make sure it's mine, which I appreciate.
Okay.
Let's be proactive.
Yeah.
Well, and to maybe be a little positive about it, we did leave the loans unapplied versus like a personal payment. And if it was a personal payment, that credit would just be sitting on the account, right? From period to period. And these are people that are borrowing loans. So part of me is like, maybe it's not so bad that we gave them their loan money back, because that's accruing interest. And so
Yeah.
like we could try to spin it positively by saying like, well, yeah, you've made some payments and you have loans, and this is a credit that you have. And although you could turn around and make a payment back, you know, you could deposit that check and make a payment back onto the account to apply for future charges. This is a loan that's accruing interest. So, you know, maybe you don't want all this money. Maybe you want to go
Yeah.
and make a
Right.
loan payment instead, and instead of it going back to your
Or
principal.
return it back, to us and make a loan adjustment to reduce your principal. I
Something.
mean, those are the options. And it, you know, when an e-check is sitting as the refundable item, I mean, we've all seen these students that have these refunds sitting on, or these credit balances sitting on their account for a long period of time when they borrowed a loan against that, you know. And so, yeah, I think that is helpful. I mean, you know, we do understand that this is confusing and that you're getting questions about it. And, you know, so we're not glad that it happened this way. But, you know, just reiterating that, yeah, these are real credit balances, that this is money that the students and parents should be paying attention to and asking questions about, to hopefully, you know, prompt them to either say, okay, yeah, if that's my money, I'll take it, or I don't want this money, I want to reduce my loan balance instead. You know, hopefully that could be the positive conversation with it. I think where it does get confusing is I know that Peter Tolo is the one that Emily brought to me earlier. And the thing that is confusing is that, you know, this student's credit of 990 was kind of split, and some of it came in the form of a Title IV refund. And this does show, again, as a fall period. If you look at the refund itself, you can see, oh no, it's actually, it actually just came, even though it's associated with the fall period. But that was just, you know, again, just due to that flip flop of when we had to go, you know, reapply their fall loan to spring. Workday still knows it was a fall loan. And so that's why it's sticking it in the fall academic period. So if a student's looking, or a parent's looking at their statement, and on the statement, you're selecting the academic period of the statement you're looking at, then this transaction will fall on the fall statement, even though they kind of see it as a spring thing because it just happened in March. So, you know, the account activity that they're looking at is not academic period specific. It's just the, you know, transactional stuff on a student's account. So if they look at the account activity, they'll see fall and spring stuff like commingle. But if they look at a statement and put in their academic period, then it's only going to pick up the things that show in these buckets, since those are what's associated to that academic period. So, so I don't know if that's helpful too, to just try to help navigate it with a parent or student. You know, one other thing to just say. So, you know, we've kind of gotten to the point of like, okay, we went and we manually applied these payments so that we could not have past due charges, because that was initially the effect, right? Is that all of a sudden somebody owed money, but then they had this unapplied loan. So we went through and we applied the loan to settle the balances that they had. But then the other thing that we did is we made a configuration change in Workday, and this happened. So I think Monday was our disbursement date. That's when all the stuff got, you know, noticed. And then before we ran the disbursements for Tuesday, Melissa went and made a configuration change in Workday to say, rather than paying oldest charge with this institutional aid, which is the configuration we've had since we fixed that problem in the fall till we noticed this problem in the spring, we went in and we made a configuration change on the payment application to say, rather than going and paying the old charges, we want you to pay the current period first, and then if you have leftover money, then you can go pay the old charges. So what we're doing now, you know, and what the configuration has now been for this last week is pay current period charges first, then you can go back and pay the old charges if you have extra money. And so what the side effect of this will be then is that if somebody owed us $500 from the fall and they only have enough aid to pay for the spring, then it's not going to go back and pay the fall. They'll still owe $500 from the fall. And so So, you know, at some point they're going to have to catch up and pay the old balance, whether it comes, you know, if they make a direct payment now of $500, then direct payments will go back and pay, you know, the oldest outstanding balance first. So that would settle it. Or if they had, you know, it's tricky because loans can only pay the current period. So a loan can't go back and pay the fall unless they have an excess and we go manually apply it. So that is another part of the process that we're doing now as well. And we've been looking, and Melissa and Katie have been looking every day at unapplied payments to say, hey, do we have an unapplied payment on the account right now, and do you have an outstanding balance, and can my unapplied payment that I have sitting here pay this outstanding balance? And if it can, then we will do it. So right now, you know, most students have their loans as fall spring, and so in the spring, that spring loan can pay the fall charges. Workday won't let it do it because Workday can only pay, you know, the current period with a Title IV loan. But we know that if we go back and get a fall spring loan, that we can pay their fall charges with a fall spring loan. So we can go and we can manually apply their excess from fall to their their excess from spring to their pending fall charge. So that is something that we are doing regularly to pay what we can. Of course, if their remaining fall balance is a chapel fine, and their only excess right now is Title IV aid, we can't use the Title IV aid to pay the chapel fine, but we might be able to be creative even with some institutional aid to pay their, you know, a chapel fine with institutional aid, and then pay their Title IV aid with the rest of their, you know, bill that they now owe for spring because we moved that aid back. So, you know, there is some kind of tweaking that we can do on our end, because our goal is not to say, hey, you know, we've got this extra money here, but we can't pay it. You have to go pay it. We're trying not to do that as much as possible, but there are just some instances where, you know, the extra money that they have right now can't pay those prior charges. So I know that was like probably way technical to just talk about, but does that help?
And with the change that we made, we're pretty much ensuring now that if there is a credit balance, that it's going to be from financial aid in the current academic period rather than from a past period. So now, like a credit, if now it's trying to apply all the financial aid to spring first, and then if there's anything left over to apply for fall, it would. And then if, you know, it's pretty much ensuring that spring aid is what's going to be the credit for the student. And then we daily are making that determination, can that spring credit pay for a past due balance from a previous period? We're applying that if we can, but it's leaving still, if there's anything remaining after that, as a credit to the student, and it will, the check and everything that the student and parent sees will be associated to the current period now instead of the previous period. If that makes sense.
So what
So
questions do you have?
Well, I was just going to say, the cool thing is this is kind of, well, it's not kind of, it's actually fixing some potential compliance holes and making things apply the way they should. It's just going to take us a little while to get used to interpreting what we're seeing. But it's actually doing stuff right, probably for the first time in a long time. And we're going to have to get used to it, and the parents are going to have to get used to it. But once we do, we're going to feel like Einsteins.
And I think different times of the year, and you know, where we saw this creep up, like again, we kind of, it's interesting because we went from conversion, we went from CX stuff getting into Workday that we wanted to pay off, because the way we had to convert data into Workday made it very limiting as to like what we could give back as a credit balance. You know, there's just all these elements that we had to deal with in data conversion. So it's like the open approach that we made actually it's really supported the data conversion. and then now we're a little bit past data conversion. Most of the net balance conversion stuff's taken care of. And then we get a new spring disbursement. It's like, oh, wow, like the fix that we did to deal with data conversion now is causing us different issues that we didn't anticipate. And so now it's like, okay, we're in a different time frame now. We now have dealt with that. We can make this switch back to have a lot less negative consequences. And because we kind of actually reconfigured it back to what we did when we noticed some of the issues in the fall. I think there could be some small tweaks from what it was back then, but pretty similar to what it was before. And now it's like, okay, we don't have to worry about data conversions much anymore. Let's restrict it, tighten it down. There's gonna be some, you know, some unintended consequences, which in some ways aren't even really unintended consequences, because the way it is right now, you know, financial aid typically is there to pay that term. It's not really there to pay the past, right? Just in general, that's what Title IV says. Institutional aid, we have more flexibility, but you know, at the end of the day, like your awards now should pay your award or your charges now. It's not really to pay the past. So it's nice if it pays the past. And if you get extra and we can pay the past, that's awesome. But it's really for the now. And so that's really how the configuration is. The thing that's going to get, you know, as we go through an academic year cycle, you know, in what we might want to anticipate in the fall is that when you have fall extra loans, you don't really have the same flexibility to pay summer or last spring, because now you're not within the loans award year anymore, right? So we have a lot of flexibility in the spring to pay fall, because the award year is typically fall spring for that student for the loan. But then next fall, that award year is going to be fall spring for 21-22. So if we have a spring 21 balance that you left, then we're not really going to have the flexibility to say pay that spring 21 balance with your fall 21 loan, because it's not in the same loan period. So, you know, there's still going to be some of these cyclical issues that will give us like different flavors of what our resolution or our ability to resolve it in the same way will be, because we have to be within our Title IV compliance. But so there's a little bit of a, you know, I wouldn't even say a moving target, but just a little bit of a, you know, this variance that we want to anticipate and that we'll continue to get used to as we get to know Workday better. But I mean, to Molly's point, at the end of the day, this is, I don't know how many times I had conversations with Katie of like, should this PLUS loan be the credit, or should that student loan be the credit? There was all this decision making that we had to do because of how generic payment application was in CX, that really at the end of the day are compliance issues with Title IV refund, with not honoring the parent, you know, the return to parent versus return to student decision on the application. You know, that all required human intervention and decision making. And it just, there was so much gray in it that it really does put us at risk. So the challenge that we have in front of us is that Workday is more nuanced and more complicated to configure because it has all these options. But when you get that right, Workday will unapply and reapply payments in the way that it should, not just based on the time that you received the payment. And, you know, we'll do all of that work for us so that we're consistent, we know what to expect, and we, you know who's getting the refund and all that sort of fun stuff. So, you know, that's kind of just the soapbox, I guess, about how it's frustrating when we're working through issues as a result of this configuration that didn't work how we thought it would. But, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel is that as we hone in to get this exactly how it should be, you know, we're in a much better situation operationally. So. Any other, I know that was a lot, so thanks for bearing with us, but other questions? All right. well, maybe that's it then.
It was like the end of our relationship. I guess it's over.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you know, continue to. I know that this is, even the understanding of this is Molly will make fun of me for saying an iterative process, but you know, the more you see this, the more questions you have, the nuggets of understanding you'll gain, and so you know, keep asking the questions if you're confused by a transaction. I know, Emily, the other element with this Peter Tolo guy was understanding, you know, what's sitting is unapplied versus what's tied to the refund. I didn't really address that directly in here. I know there was some confusion thinking that that Workday was being inconsistent in what it was calling a couple of things. And so I don't know if that question's still outstanding, if you want me to dig into that at all. We do have a little bit more time that we had scheduled.
No, I mean, I think it was just sort of, that was early on in the whole thing. So I was so used to just going to applied payments and I could see what was there and what had been applied, and they were very specific, but then you just go to transactions and it's fine. It
Okay.
makes sense there, so.
Yeah.
Not a
Okay.
huge deal.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, if anything, Workday should not be inconsistent, and if something is inconsistent, then it you know, it does feel like there's something wrong. But I do think that, and I'm talking super loud, and somebody's on a Zoom in here, so that's why I'm trying to be quieter. But you know, if there is something that does appear to be inconsistent, then yeah, let's talk through it, because it may just be how we're interpreting, you know, what we're seeing. But if something actually does appear to be wrong, we definitely want to know about it. And you guys brought up a really good one with that block tuition issue the other day, where there's some funky bug going on, and I think that Christy was going to try something today to resolve that one situation. So I'm hoping that those 3 students that were impacted could get fixed potentially today. So I'll keep you guys updated on that. But yeah, but thanks for your participation in this and helping us work through these things.
I've been trying to think about how I don't know what you've been saying to parents that are asking about, like, why does this say fall on my refund check, or why is the period associated in my refund check? And I mean, even trying to talk through it with Kevin, I was just thinking, essentially, it's like their loans are usually for both fall and spring. So if they can consider both periods together, we just kind of took both periods together and evaluated all of your financial aid. And so even though Workday says it's for fall, it's from your fall spring loan. So from, you know, from the sum of your charges and the sum of your financial aid for this year, that is just a credit, and it just picked a period to associate it to. Like, that might be the easiest way to try to explain it to them, but you know, kind of reiterating, like, this loan is for both fall and spring. And so, you know, it's, if you don't want this credit, then let's reduce your loan, or you can turn around and make a payment on your account, or you can turn around and make a payment towards your loan, like whatever you want to do. So, or maybe they have last year's loans and it might be good to make some interest payments on those loans with that money, or I don't know. I mean, you're kind of it's kind of bad to pay loans with loans, but like,
I mean, it's a great way to explain it. You know, your loans,
Yeah.
we really want to help people minimize their loan debt. And so we want that to be applied last. So if we have other aid that is covering all these charges, that's a real easy way to say, guess what? This is excess loan that you don't necessarily need. Now it's yours to do with what you want, but here are your options. So.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily, you know, it says fall, but I guess I'd just say, like, well, your loan is for the year, right? So Workday just has to pick a period. So it just happened to pick fall, but it's for your fall spring loan. And maybe that might eliminate some of the confusion, you know, around.
Yeah. And you can, I mean, you can couple that with, we're, you know, and the way we're in a new system, and the way that things applied this year, and the way that it's tying it to it, we had some issues that we're working out, but it is a fall spring loan, and you know, this is what your balance is based on that, you know, the fall spring, or your credit balance is based on the fall spring, and you know, go that way, because some parents dig into it, and we know that. Melissa, actually, I don't know if you guys know, but Melissa was an advisor at Point Loma many years back as well.
Melissa, you had your first office, right? The one right next to George Ladder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or yeah, was that mine? Or was I one down from, I don't remember. I think I did have that one. I don't know.
So we are, you know, not that we're experiencing these same conversations that you're having right now, but we have all been in your shoes too. So we understand the types of, you know, digging that happens with parents, and we're very, very thankful for the work that you guys are doing. You know, it's been a crazy year. So, all right. Well,
hey, on a positive note, did you guys see the new refund payment elections on the student profiles, Kevin?
Oh, yes, that is.
So there's a lot of things.
Yeah, I think that Katie may have told you about that.
And he probably has none. He has none. So
yeah.
Yay.
I wonder if she has one.
He hasn't made any decisions of how he'd like to receive refunds.
Neither did. I know that Alana has one.
But there's like a lot of things. If you find yourself searching for something like specific to a student that would be helpful to just see on the student, I think those are things to submit to us and let us know, because there's a lot that I can put into a report and then display on the student profile like this. And so just trying to think, you know, that was one thing I thought about, was like, oh, that'd probably be so helpful, because you guys have that refund payment elections report to help communicate to people like, hey, sign up for direct deposit. But it could also be nice when you're talking with a student about a refund, or a refund that they want to request, to be able to see really quickly, have they made any elections? So I went ahead and added that there without really asking too many people. But I think if there's other cases that you find yourself like having to search for something outside of like navigating on the student, let us know, because it might be something we could easily just add to what you see here on the student.
Yeah, another thing that Melissa and I were talking about the other day is, you know, this idea that maybe we want to split out the meal plan and housing data from the financial aid information that, you know, right now you're going to this custom data field in order to get some information about student account stuff. And it's like, well, maybe the late fee and meal plan and housing stuff makes more sense to be housed on student financials instead of financial aid, especially as we start gearing up for processing financial aid. The financial aid screen is going to get busier and busier. And so trying to separate those things out, you know, some of this stuff we just didn't really realize we maybe had the flexibility that we do. And Melissa has the security to do it for us and not have somebody else tell us whether we can or can't do it. So that's helpful as well. But, you know, I think that we're going to be getting to that point where, you know, just want to continue to get that feedback from you guys. It's like, if there's something that would make your life a little bit easier, you know, beyond just like, this is an issue, it needs to be fixed, like, oh, this would make me happy to make this change. You know, I think that we're learning more about Workday to where we are understanding our flexibility more, and plus Workday does continue to put out new things as well. So, you know, hopefully this next year will become less about addressing issues that we are facing based on understanding configuration and all that sort of stuff, and maybe a little bit more about what makes things a little bit better and easier for you guys and for students and parents and so on. So
we're trying.
Well, I think we have to.
You're still recording, right, Molly?
What was that?
You're still recording, right?
I'm still recording. But I mean, I think we all expect that there's going to be, like, when you first implement a system, there's going to be little refinements. So we
Yeah.
appreciate what you guys are doing. I'm stoked that it's smart enough to be applying payments the way it's supposed to be done. That was just left up to our brains. Like you said, it's just, it's a lot. So so before we end, I'll go ahead and stop recording, I guess. May, how is your hand? We wanted to, is it both hands or is it one hand? What is?
It's just the right hand, and then we're waiting for the left